yay, man. All out of options, nothing to choose. I pissed out on Netflix, I'm sick of the news. I'd sign up to Sky, but I don't wanna pay. I've been on furlough since May. Never go and listen to a Cockney attitude. Ooh, breaking away. Got to find a better way. I'd rather watch Auf Wiedersehen again and listen to what these old men have to say.
Hello, and
Guten Tag.
and welcome to Auf Wiedersehen Again,
Yeah.
episode number 9. And it's me, your genial host, Mr. Andy Sledge, with my forever loyal co-host and partner in crime in London, Mr. George Bradley. George,
Hello.
how the devil are you today?
Yeah, pretty good. I'm looking a bit redder. I sat outside the pub yesterday for an hour and got like a tomato.
I had noticed. I was about to say you're looking very summery.
Well, us gingers, it doesn't take long. Just a brief snapshot, and it's.
I was going to say, what did you sit outside for all of 6 minutes?
yeah. I look like Barry on the sunbed, didn't I? But,
I mean, wearing a white T-shirt hasn't helped your cause in any way. But anyway,
yeah.
the summer, George, look at this. The summer is here, mate.
It is.
You are out consuming beverages in beer gardens. Me, not so much. But the pubs are reopening. You're allowed to sit outside. The weather's getting a little wee bit nicer. There is light at the end of the tunnel.
Actually, the pub I was in yesterday, they run out of lager. They were so busy at the weekend. I had to drink a pale ale, but which I saw.
My good Lord.
But yeah, they run out of beer. They were so busy.
I heard there was so I went boxing on Sunday.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
Back for the first time. And one of the kids at boxing works in a pub, and he said that out of the 6 different beers they've got on tap, they'd run out of 4 of them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was like, obviously, people were in their starting blocks, weren't they? They were
Yeah,
like, right, I haven't had a fucking pint in a pub for 6 months or whatever. I'm going to go and get fucked up. So, yeah, but, yeah, me, not so much. I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, even if I was still drinking, the thought of having to fucking, like, all of the rules that you had to go through, I'd have rather just got a fucking some tinnies and went and sat on a park bench.
Well, yeah.
But anyway, did you enjoy yourself, young George?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been out at night. I don't really go out at night, but it was lovely in the afternoon. I mean, it was pretty quiet. Just sit there in the sun trap and.
Where did you go? You were in Euston, weren't you?
A little pub I've been going to for years. It's nice. Yeah, it's a nice crowd. But I think they're getting their beer delivery this morning, so I might pop out a little bit later just for a couple.
It'd be rude not to.
Top up this redness.
It'd be rude not to. So there you go. So that's it. I mean, like I say, me, not I don't think anyone's listening, George, but I went to Newcastle the other day. So
all right.
Didn't take any pictures or didn't let anyone know on social media because I didn't want anyone being like, hey, you're not supposed to be doing that. But yeah, like the lockdown is easing, and my mother hasn't seen me kid for a long, long time. And my mother and my stepdad have both had the vaccine now. So me and my kid have both had the corona. So
it's all good.
So we went. So we're recording. This is actually, I mean, interesting for us, but not for essentially for the listeners, because it won't make any difference to them because it'll still be released on the same day. But we're actually recording this a few days late, aren't we, George? Normally, normally we've already got one in the can. But anyway, so yes. So I had a busy week last week. And then slipped up to Newcastle for a couple of days, and then came back down, and it was nice weather, and it was good. It was good to have a little bit of a break from the norm. So and then, like I say, the gym reopened last week, so it was nice to be back in training. Got a bit of the old lockdown poundage to try and get rid of.
I'm still increasing mine.
But hey, it is what it is. So anyway. As always, if any of our beautiful listeners or watchers would like to offer us any constructive criticism, feedback, or abuse, please feel free to contact us on the podcast email address, which is Auf Wiedersehen Again @gmail.com. That's Auf Wiedersehen Again @gmail.com. Please follow us on social medias. Our Instagram is Auf Wiedersehen Again Podcast. So that's Instagram @Auf Wiedersehen Again Podcast. Our Twitter is @Auf Again. That's @Auf Again. So please do follow us on Twitter. We have a Facebook page. So please do like and share the Facebook page. And the Facebook page is Auf Wiedersehen Again Podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, great. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel and click that bell. If you are listening on audio, please do at some point go to YouTube, search out our YouTube channel, Auf Wiedersehen Again Podcast, and like I say, subscribe to the YouTube channel and click that bell, and that will alert you to any new episodes. And obviously, we are available on all good podcast platforms for audio, which is Spotify, iTunes, and Google Podcast Breaker, and many, many more. And new episodes are released every Friday at 10 a.m. And our theme music, as always, is composed and performed by the guitar man, Mr. Lee Dosky. And as always, please do like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And as always, we are sponsored by Top Gun Tattooing of number 12, the Harris Arcade in Reading. And their website is www.topguntattoo.co.uk. And their phone number is 01189 968 667. And as always, we've got a couple of fantastic tattoo offers for our listeners. So any of our listeners, you are entitled to a 20% discount of any tattoo at Top Gun Tattooing. And the way to activate this discount is to contact Zach from Top Gun Tattooing, either in person at number 12, the Harris Arcade in Reading, or on the phone. And you say, Zach, I'd like my 20% discount. And the code word that you have to say is Hadaway and Shite Man. So if you contact Zach and say Hadaway and Shite Man, you will get your 20% discount. But not only that, George. Now, I know technically sunburn and tattoos don't mix. How are you feeling about the Neville and Lottie tattoo, George?
Yeah, it's getting more. It's getting,
I reckon 8 pints. I reckon if I
eight or nine, probably.
8 or 9 pints.
10 definitely.
10, okay. So I reckon what's that, about 40 quid's worth of pints?
Yeah.
And then probably about 80 quid for a tattoo. Not bad. I reckon get you for 120 quid, we can get you covered.
Yeah. I'll say Hadaway and Shite Man, I'll get a bit of a discount. Yeah.
Exactly. But if any of our listeners want a free tattoo, we are offering everyone the opportunity for a free tattoo. Terms and conditions apply. The free tattoo has to be a Neville and Lottie tattoo. So as per Neville's tattoo, if you want to get a free Auf Wiedersehen Pet Neville and Lottie tattoo, you've got to email us on aufwiedersehenagain@gmail.com. We will take you down into Top Gun Tattooing. We will pay for, photograph, film, and broadcast you getting your Neville and Lottie tattoo. So don't hesitate. Email us today and we will be down at Top Gun Tattooing showing you how to get your Neville and Lottie tattoo. Now, we actually forgot to do this last week. So after the huge success of our first giveaway competition, which was for the Pat Roach book, and that was won by one of our loyal listeners, Lynn Wharton.
Yeah, I sent her a message actually. Yeah, she said,
Tremendous. Yeah, well, I was a little bit slack because I had a busy week last week. I was a bit slack. I've actually just put the book in the post this morning. So again, I sent Lynn a message and said, sorry for being a little bit slack. Your prize is on its way. So that should arrive with Liz within the next couple of days. So after the huge success of our first giveaway competition, we are now into our second giveaway competition. So all of our readers are able to win the Jimmy Nail autobiography, A Northern Soul. So this is the Jimmy Nail book. I have read it myself.
Ah, you finished it now then, yeah?
It was indeed, yes. It was a very, very good read. So if you would like to win the Jimmy Nail biography, there are some very, very simple things that you need to do. You need to be a follower of us on social media. So either Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, preferably all three. And on each one of those social media channels is a post entitled Giveaway of the Jimmy Nail biography. So what you need to do is you need to be a follower of us on that social media channel. You need to like the post. You need to tag 3 friends in the post itself, in the comments section, and you need to share the post. So if it's Facebook, you share the Facebook post. If it's Twitter, you retweet it. And if it's Instagram, if you can share it to your story and tag us so we know that you've done it. So like I say, follow us, like the post, share the post and tag 3 friends, and we will choose a winner at random in a couple of weeks' time. And the winner will be in receipt of the Jimmy Nail book, and it is a fantastic read.
I bet it is. Yeah.
Find out not only about everything to do with Auf Wiedersehen Pet, but also things like Spender and his music and his stint in jail for which someone told me was potentially football hooliganism. It was something to do. He had a fight anyway, and he backed
couple of beers. Yeah.
But I think it was actually a little bit more football hooligan related than he makes out in the book. But anyway, never mind. Like I say, very, very interesting read, and you can find out more about Jimmy Nail. So it's all the boring stuff over and done with. So George, this week, series 1, episode number 9.
Yeah.
The Alien. Now, this was first broadcast on the 13th of January, 1984. And
I was 19.
Oh, look at that. I was 8. Not even 8. 7 I was. Look at that. 7.
Oh.
You are super old, George. Super.
Yeah.
So obviously one of the main characters that we see is Magowan. Magowan is back. So we had a taster of Magowan.
The Mac.
Taster of Magowan in an earlier episode when he weighed in Herr Fister because his wages were late. And now he is back. So we discussed Michael Elphick last time, but we obviously just had another good dig into Michael Elphick, and he has 106 credits on IMDb.
Oh.
And I mean, essentially, Michael Elphick.
He's been around. I mean, he was a big star in the late 70s
huge.
and 80s. Yeah.
He was huge. He was massive. So, like I said, there was the 2 things that he was massively known for was he was Boone, and I mean, who didn't watch Boone for Christ's sake? Yeah. Like Boone was proper staple TV for people of that age, So, and
a great theme tune as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So he worked between 1969 and his last credit was 2003. He actually died in 2002. So obviously he filmed something and then that came out later on. He's among his 106 credits. Like I say, Boone was the main one that I think everyone will remember him for. But there was also a show which I used to watch called 3 Up, 2 Down. Do you remember that one?
Yeah, so vaguely. It was on ITV, wasn't it? It was an ITV one, I think.
I think so, yeah. But basically what it was is it was a family. It was his daughter.
That's right.
And the woman's son or whatever. They were the in-laws, right? So there was the family. There was the family, the husband, the wife, and the kid, and they had a basement flat. And for whatever reason, one of the mother-in-law and the father-in-law from the other side both found themselves upon hard times and had to move into the basement flat. And the mother-in-law thought she was posh as fuck, and obviously Michael Elphick was common as muck. and you know, they had to live together. And the mother-in-law fucking hated him, and he was trying to be nice to her and all. And I remember it. I remember it quite a lot because I remember he took up taxidermy, and there was a bit in it where he'd stuffed this snake, and like the woman was horrified. It was quite funny. Anyway, so that was again. It was a major sitcom that was on, you know, probably Saturday night, 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
It was on when I was a kid. So those were it. But I mean, like I say, among the 106 credits, he was also, back in the day, he was on, he did a few episodes, quite a lot of episodes of Coronation Street. But he also, more modern, like before, not long before he died, also did quite a lot of episodes of EastEnders.
Yeah, with his, he had very flowery, loud shirts, didn't he? That was one of his trademarks.
To be honest, mate, you don't watch it. So, however, did you know he was also in With Neil and I?
Oh, was he?
Yeah. Oh. He didn't get paid for it. He did it for free. Yeah. Oh. Like apparently, like wanted to do it so much. So he did it for free. He was in an episode of The Bill. He was in an episode of Supergran.
Oh.
Which was filmed in Newcastle, don't forget.
Yeah.
He was in an episode of The Professionals. He was in Quadrophenia. He was in an episode of The Sweeney.
Oh, and
many, many more. So, like I say, superstar Michael Elphick, 106 credits on IMDb, an absolute legend. It was, you know, it's quite a common thing that you spoke about it when you said he came in your bar. And
and then do you know you probably won't remember the show, you're too young, but his drinking partner, when he used to come in my pub, was a guy called David Yip. And he was in a huge hit in the 70s called The Chinese Detective.
I do not know that, no.
That was his drinking pal.
Oh, right.
And they both consumed quite a lot.
Well, it said on IMDb that, you know, his drinking problem was quite a common knowledge. It wasn't like he was a secret drinker or anything like that.
Oh, Jesus.
And
I've never seen anyone who could knock back so many gins.
Yeah, and so he was a raging alcoholic, obviously, by the sounds of it, and you know, suffered the fact that he died quite young. So, but like I say, it was. He said,
wasn't he only in his 50s or something? He looked a lot older. Yeah.
So
he was 53 or something, 54 or something.
Yeah, mid 50s. Aye. So it said that he said about his drinking. He said that his drinking never affected other people's. Like he never let the drinking affect other people. I.e. He was always on time, but he might have been he himself might have been a bit rough, but he never let the other person down by not being there or, you know, whatever. Anyway, so several locations that are used. There are locations in Dusseldorf, Hamburg as usual, but they also have a location in White City, which is like Ealing way, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and also when we open up in the swimming pool, and I'm assuming the swimming pool is the same swimming pool. They didn't actually mention it on the website, but obviously last time I believe it was Shepherd's Bush, wasn't it? The swimming pool.
Yeah.
So this is where the episode opens up. So the episode opens up the outside view of the swimming pool, and then it cuts to the inside, like I say, which we believe is to be Shepherd's Bush, which is the same as last time, and it's Dennis, Neville, and Barry, and they are having a race across the swimming pool.
Yeah.
So they get to the end of they finish the race, and Dennis opens up the episode and he says, "You're too good, buddy lad. You're the undisputed champion in the tournament of arseholes." So yeah, very much you know, not they're not he's not you know, thinking that they're too good. He's trying to be comical about their race, and Neville's being a bit bashful about it. He's like, "Oh, I got a good start," and Dennis says, "No, we were well beat." And then Barry, with his goggles and his nose clip, like right melt, he's like, "There's no beating you two." So anyway, they cut to the changing rooms, and Neville's talking. You know, he's like, "I wasn't that bad at school. Then you just get out of it." And he says, "You know, mind you, since we've been coming back here, you know, I'm getting back into it." And Dennis says, "You know, that's the sad thing about sports. After school, you let it all go." Now,
conflicts with a pub.
Well, Neville says something here, which again, I don't know any Geordie that would say this, right?
Yeah.
And he goes, well, you played soccer for a while then.
Yeah.
Who the fuck uses the word soccer? I'm like, what? Football?
Maybe he'd just been to America for a trip or something.
Exactly. He goes, particularly in this age as well, nobody would ever use the word soccer. So
Yeah.
I don't know whose idea it was to put that into the script. I'll have a word with Ian Lafreniere the next time I see him.
Yeah.
It says, but you played soccer for a while. And so I'm like, fucking soccer. Anyway, so football. He played football. And then again, he's like off and on. And Neville says to Barry, says he was a grand player, Barry, centre back, never let anything past. And Barry's like, you're a stopper. I can imagine you've got football as calves. And Dennis is ball bollock naked in the changing room. And he said, keep your eyes on yourself. And fucking gives him a bit of a whip with a towel. And, Barry says, why did you give it up? And he says, well, sooner or later, your footballing aspirations come into conflict with the pub.
Yeah.
Especially up
as they do, yeah.
Yeah, get a beer gut, smoking too many fags, kid yourself, you can still do it, but you can't. And he says, I tell you what, I do miss it. Neville says, yeah, me too. Great being part of a team. I love the away games, me. Coming back on the bus, crates of booze, 3-card brag and a sing-song. Magic. Says, Barry's like, pity we can't get a team here, isn't it? Take on the Erics. And Neville says, there's not enough of us for a football team. So now Barry's got an idea. He's like, it doesn't have to be footy. In fact, I prefer it wasn't because I can't play to save me life. Neville, obviously, tries to angle into what he's good at. Says, could be swimming. Great idea. Let's get a team. And Barry said, you could be, but you're the only real talented one. So Nev says, there must be something we can channel our energies into. What do you reckon, Den? And Den says, well, you're talking about our hut. You're talking about a bunch of confirmed non-competitors. All they want to channel their energy into is sucking beer. Yeah. And Neville's like, there must be something. And Barry's now leaning towards what he's good at. And he's table tennis. But he says, we could play table tennis if we had a table. So, Barry is definitely trying to angle the table tennis. So they cut to the site, and Herr Grunwald turns up. He's got nice Mercedes. Has Herr Grunwald?
Have you noticed he has he has the old SS leather coat on. He's got the full length leather coat.
I mean, I wouldn't go as far as to say it's an SS coat, but I get what you're saying.
That's what they used to wear. Yeah.
I mean, he does, Herr Flick of the Gestapo. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So Herr Grunwald turns up. He's in his Merc, and you can see by the look on his face, he is not happy. So it cuts to the hut, and Moxie and Wayne are in the hut. And Moxie's asking, Wayne's reading the paper, and Moxie says, what's in the paper then? Wayne says, nothing that's going to change the course of history, son. It's the music press. And Moxie comes over and he says, oh, you're really into that, aren't you? And Wayne says, music is my life, Moxie. Now, here we have quite an ironic line. Moxie says, you should have been a rock star. You're a dead ringer for Ronnie Wood. Anyone ever told you that? Now, did you know that Wayne was actually a rock star? Yes. He was in the, I've watched the videos, He was quite good. Well, so predominantly he was in a band in the UK called the Heavy Metal Kids. That's it, yeah. And he actually got sacked out of the band for drinking too much and taking too many drugs. Yeah. Now, this was in the 70s. It was 1975. Now, I mean, it begs the question, George, how many drink and drugs do you have to be doing to get thrown out of a rock band in the 70s? I mean, like, if there's anywhere where you're allowed to take drink and drugs, it's being a member of a rock band in the 70s. It's all part of the thing, isn't it? I mean, So the fact that he got binned out of a rock band in 1975 because he had too bad a drug habit definitely sets alarm bells ringing in the fact that he was out of control.
I mean, I did read another story where he was. I mean, I don't know how true it is because my flatmate here is a huge AC/DC fan. I mean, he's followed them since. Apparently, Wayne went to be up for the main singer.
Yeah, he was.
He turned up with a crate of beer and he was out of his brains, and they didn't want him. But I mean, my mate had never heard that before. But, yeah.
Oh, I don't know if I'm not sure, but particularly, but whether he was offered the job or whether he wasn't, or I mean, like you're saying, he was basically the next in line for the job. And either he fucked it up or he turned it down or whatever. Because I think he turned it away to pursue other avenues or whatever. And you'd think, hold on, that would have been a good maneuver. But and he also then, so after that, he got linked up with someone called Casino Steel and became very big in Norway. So he had a #1 hit in Norway.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so basically this Casino Steel was a Norwegian rocker, and whatever the sound that they produced together, this sort of metally, blend of music, very, very big in Norway. And as well as having a #1 in Norway, they had many, many top 10 hits in Norway.
Yeah.
So there you go. So he said, you should have been a rock star. He actually was. And he says, Moxie says, you're a dead ringer for Ronnie Wood. Anybody ever told you that? And Wayne says, yeah, a couple of times. In fact, as it happens, I signed Woody's autograph for a couple of Fraulines down the Old Town on Tuesday. Moxie's like, go away, you didn't, did you? Wayne says, yeah, no, I'm done though. They were thrilled at having met one of their idols, and I was gratified at having put a bit of colour into her otherwise drab existence. And Moxie says, that don't seem right to me somehow. And Wayne says, look, I didn't abuse Woody's good name by jumping. I could have.
They must have blew him out in the end.
I could have. Could you? He says, yeah, they were all over me like a cheap coat they were, but I've got a code of ethics, Moxie. I know where to draw the line. Really, do you, Wayne?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah. And I mean, he says, Woody's good name, Ronnie Wood. I mean, like, I'm pretty sure Ronnie Wood hasn't got a very good name. He has taken a huge amount of drugs. Anyway, Moxie stammers very commendable this day and age. And Wayne says, yeah, ain't it? He says, mind you, being ethical don't off put a crimp in your nuts. And this is where Herr Grunwad enters the hut. And he's got a face like a well-smacked horse. He's not a happy-looking character. So Wayne makes a joke and he says, hello, Herr Grunwad. It's not Monday already, is it? And Herr Grunwad says, no, it is not. It is Sunday. And on Sunday, I expect to be with my family at home. And Wayne says, they've turfed you out, have they? Never mind, son, pull up a bed.
That'll be another story later on.
And we accept all sorts in here. And Grunwald, please, I am not in the mood for your insolence. Where's Patterson? And Wayne says, Dennis, he's down the baths. I think, what do you want him for? And he says, he is your leader.
Your leader.
And Wayne says, suppose so. It's not a role he relishes, though. And Moxie says, why? What's the problem? And he says, Englanders are the problem. And he looks at Wayne and Moxie. And he says, they always are. So they cut from the hut to the bar, and at the bar it's Oz and Neville, and they're obviously talking about competitions. And Oz says, if you want a competition, pinball is the one. He says it's the I'm almost a grand master on that thing. And Neville says, that's not exercise. And then Oz says, what about arm wrestling? I'll take on anybody at that. And Neville says, that's another pub game. We want something to take us out of the pub. And Oz says, well, you can count me out of that. Yeah, Oz is not interested in leaving the bar in any way.
You're a couple of old women.
Yeah. So anyway, so Dennis, he says, I told you, Neville. He says, you're beating your head against a brick wall. And Oz says, he's always trying to organise things, man. And he says, I'm not. And he says, yes, you are. You and Barry like a couple of old women. You'd have this place turned into a youth club if you had your way. Bollocks. Next thing you know, you'll be wanting to go for nature walks and to collect butterflies. In it. Is it, give us, and he says to the barman, he says, give us a bottle of beer over here. And Barry is still, Barry's still trying to
the old ping pong on the go.
Angle the table tennis. Yeah, he says, I still fancy table tennis, Dennis. All chip in and buy a table. He says, I used to be a dab hand. And he brings it up once again. Barry's favourite thing. He says, I used to play in the West Bromwich and District Sunday Methodist League, I did. And everyone laughs. And Barry's like, what's wrong with that? And Oz says, nothing. I'm just remembering where I knew your name from. And again, everyone laughs. So Barry says, take the mick, I don't care. I'm the one who's got the trophy on the mantelpiece. He says, it's next to my brother's signed autograph of Lena Zavaroni. Now, George, you're old.
Yeah.
You know who Lena Zavaroni is.
Oh, of course. She won Opportunity Knocks.
But I didn't. I'd never heard of her before.
Oh, yeah.
So I did a little bit of research. Well, I mean, I say.
Oh, she was a massive star in the 70s.
Yeah, well, I went on to Wikipedia and found out some things about Lena Zavaroni. So as you have said, you are correct. She won Opportunity Knocks and was a child star. She was. Her dad was a guitarist. Like I think it was her granddad was Italian, came over and they owned a fish.
Got a bit of a sad end though.
Yeah, well, the family owned a fish and chip shop, and they used to do turns at a weekend and that. And she was singing with her dad.
I remember watching the Opportunity Knocks in the 70s every week. And she was on it.
So she was singing with her dad, and some TV producer heard her singing and was like, "Fucking hell, you're brilliant. We need to get you." And yeah, so she won Opportunity Knocks, and she still to this day holds the record as the youngest person ever to have an album in the top 10 of the charts.
Oh, all right.
So she was like,
she 13 or something?
Or 10, I think. Well,
10. Oh, she's
like whatever. I mean, like, ridiculously young. And I think, 10 years old, she was 10 years and 100 and whatever days. Yeah, she still to this day holds the record for being the youngest person to have an album in the top 10. And after she won Opportunity Knocks, she went to America and she sung on stage with Frank Sinatra and Lucille Ball. She was invited to the White House to sing for President Ford.
Oh.
She was best friends with Bonnie Langford. But, like you say, as with a lot of child stars, suffered massively with anorexia and depression.
Yeah.
And by the late 90s, she was living on benefits and was even accused of shoplifting at one point.
Oh God!
I mean, like a real fall from grace. And unfortunately, she went into hospital for an operation, and they think it was a partial, like it was to cure her depression. It was a kind of they think it was a partial lobotomy or something like. I mean, pretty brutal. She'd had electroconvulsive therapy and everything like that to try and cure the depression. And anyway, so she had the operation and she seemed to be getting a lot better. And then she caught pneumonia and she died. And she was only 35 years old. So very, 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 very sad end. But yes, like you say, Barry. This obviously was long before she died. And so Barry's brother was obviously a big fan of Lena Zavaroni. So Oz questions, he says, what trophy are you talking about? And Barry says, well, it's only a bloody pewter tankard, isn't it? And he says it's engraved with my name and Helen Ferguson. And Dennis says, who's Helen Ferguson? Barry says, that's my partner. Mixed doubles. And he goes, mixed doubles, runners up. They didn't even win. And he says 1979, West Bromwich and District Sunday Methodist League, mixed doubles, runners up in the table tennis. And that was, and then Oz says, like, that's a pinnacle of a bloke's career. And Barry says, well, nobody can ever take it away from me. And Oz says, I shouldn't think anyone would want to. And so Neville, turns to Dennis and he says, lost causes they are. And Barry says, I did warn you, Neville. Mind you, I reckon we could make the next. Oh, no, sorry. Dennis says, I did warn you, Neville. He says, mind you, I reckon we can make the next Olympics in lethargy. So basically, Dennis is saying that everyone's a lazy bastard. So Wayne enters the bar with some news for Dennis.
The leader.
Yeah, he says, "Here, Den, Grunwald's looking for you." And he orders himself a beer. And Dennis, like on a Sunday, he's like, "Grunwald, what's he want?" And Wayne says, "Well, you know that nutter Magowan." And Barry says, "Oh, he's a bit of a bloody head case, isn't he?" Wayne says, "Well, apparently he had a bit of a tiff in a bar last night."
Just a tiff.
Barry says, "A bit of a tiff." And Wayne says, "I suppose fracas is a better word, really." Anyway, he's put some Eric in the hospital and he's in the nick. Neville says, "Doesn't surprise me. He's a nutter." Dennis says, "Well, what's that got to do with me?" Anyway, Wayne explains. He says, "Well, he must have given his ex-employer's name, who's run Grunwald, who's come down here to tell us it's our responsibility to bail him out." And everyone's like, well, and he says, "Why us?" And Wayne says, "Because he's a Brit." Says the behaviour of the Brits is none of his business. And Dennis said, "Well, it's none of my business either, is it? He lives in the hostel, doesn't he? He's not in our hut. Let him stop in the nick." And Wayne explains, "He's still a Brit though, isn't he, Den? And Grunwald sees you as top man." And Dennis is like, "Oh, bloody hell, man." He says, "I'm not accountable for every madman in Germany just because they're British." And even Oz says, he says, he's a bit of a hooligan, him, like, like Oz is saying that Magowan's off his nut. And Barry says, "The best place for him, isn't it? Bloke like that in the nick." And Wayne continues to explain. He says, "Trouble is, Grunwald reckons if we can't take care of our own, we can all ship out.
The next boat home."
Yeah, and Dennis is like, "What?" He said that. And Neville's like, "It's not fair. It's nothing to do with us." And Wayne's like, "I'm just telling you." And Neville says, "What you mean? It's us or him or us?" And Wayne says, either we look after it or we get the next boat home." And Dennis sighs. "Oh, bloody hell."
Not again.
Well, that's it. So they have to go to the police station and bail Magowan out.
Police-eye.
Yeah, so Dennis and Neville are at the police station and they've obviously, they've had a whip round and they've had to bail Magowan out. So if they've all had a whip round, I mean, what do you reckon they've all put in 50 quid each or something like that? Maybe he's even 50 quid each. So he's like, we'll later find out that Oz didn't chip in. But yeah, so
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
probably, the bail's probably like 300 or 500 quid. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
still
that.
Quite cheap.
But I mean, back in the day, that was, so they probably all put in at least a day's wages. You know what I mean? So anyway, Dennis shows Neville and he says, "Personally, I don't think he's worth that much." And Neville, quite rightly, has concerns. He says that he's the type of person that will skip bail, Den. And Dennis actually says, "I doubt that he's probably in as much bother back home than he is here." So Magowan is being brought out by the German coppers, and straight away he's being belligerent and aggressive and just an obnoxious prick. And he's like, "I can walk out of here on my own without any help from you lot. Listen, I know exactly what I had, so if you Erics have divvied up anything between you, I'll know where's." Then he says, "Where's me Saint Christopher?" Like, he's Saint Christopher, the patron saint of travellers. He's got it like Magowan, the hard drinking, violent, lunatic is desperate to cling on to his religious symbol. Neville, you can see Neville straight away regrets offering the money. He's like, "Can we have our money back?" And Magowan, screaming, "You had no right pulling me in here in the first place, did you?" And then he sees Dennis and he's like, "Hello, Geordie." And then he's on the way out and he starts lifting the counter up and starts giving it large to the.
He's non-stop, isn't he? He just wants to have a row.
He's just one of them fucking idiots, don't you? You know what I mean? Like he thinks the world's against him and that. It must be fucking tiring living your life like that. And Dennis is just like, "Look, let's don't make waves. Let's just get out." And Magowan's like, "I've got a bollocking hangover." And so Magowan explains himself.
Only a couple of jars.
The innocent party in all of this. He's like, "I was only having a couple of jars, minding my own business."
Jars, I love that.
When the Naff and Erics started, that I wasn't, and he said I wasn't, and he started that I wasn't looking for any trouble.
Yeah.
And he says, "Well, blokes like you never are they?" And straight away he's like, "What's that supposed to mean?" Now, just out of interest, this is the part. So when they come out the police station,
Yeah.
That's the bit that's filmed in White City. That's a
I read that. Yeah.
housing estate in White City. Now, they could have, I suppose they could have found somewhere that looks a bit better. It just does look like a very, very English estate, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you know, the way, you know.
Yeah, they're walking through it, an estate.
It doesn't look, it sounds funny to say it because it is only walls and pavements and whatever, but it doesn't look German. It looks very English. So, yeah, so it's in White City.
British bricks.
Aye, British bricks, that's it. And so, you know, Dennis says, you know, every time a bloke like you says he's not looking for trouble, you can bet your bottom dollar that's exactly what he's looking for. And then Magowan's like, got his hackles up. Is that what you're after, is it? And Dennis says, you know, Howie, man, knocking on the head. We're not the enemy. We just bailed you out, remember? And he's like, just don't have a go at me, right? And Neville's like, just leave it off, will you? And you know, Magowan's leave it out. And he's like, what's the matter with you? And no one's saying nothing. And Magowan's like, they better not either. And he's just like you say, 100 miles an hour all the time. And Dennis is like, just calm down. He's like, I'm just saying. And it's like, well, I'm just saying. We chipped in to get you out. So come Monday, you straighten the score. Magowan says, that's no threat. And he says, as long as you do, we've got better things to do with our money. Magowan's like, I've told you, no bother. Right. And then Magowan, straight away, the cause of, it's like Homer Simpson, the cause of and solution to all of my problems, says, I'm going to go and buy myself a jar. And Neville says, you know, he's a head case. He is, let's get back. So they get back to the hut and Moxie's making the tea. And Wayne's complaining that he is working with wet feet, because he is working in 3 inches of water. Moxie's made the tea, says tea up, and he's got the cupboards are at Mother Hubbard's cupboards bare, and he's offering up what's in there. He says there's bread if anyone wants. And Wayne says, what a delightful lunch we have before us, tea and bread. And Moxie says, well, there's also pilchards and raspberry jam, the devastating combination. And he says, sorry, Moxie, I didn't realise you put a bit of effort into it. Could I see the wine list? And Moxie says, you know, look, it's not my fault. Wayne says, you're on cookhouse. And he says, yeah, but there's no housekeeping since we bailed out Magowan. So, yeah, you know, the lads are going short on their lunches because they've had to,
bail out.
And Wayne says, that's what a way to live. And Barry, he says, yeah, you know how keen Nev is to instigate some extramural activities. You're like, what? Again, Barry trying to use a word that he just completely fucking.
He's read somewhere.
And he says, this magazine's given me an idea. We could form a group. And Wayne says, form a group? Moxie says, yeah, that'll be right up your street. You look the part anyway. And anyway, Den enters. He says, the letter for you, Barry. And Barry replies with his usual bustin' tar. Anyway, Dennis has got a postcard from Bomber, which obviously explains Bomber's absence. Bomber's obviously gone home for a week to see his family. He says, the weather's fine, the beer's even better, and I'm glad none of you are here. And then Dennis looks at the table and he says, champion, pilchards in raspberry jam. And Moxie says, that's all we've got then. Anyway, Neville's been given a letter and he queries, he says, this letter's got a German postmark. And Oz is like, so what? He says, well, I don't know anyone in Germany who would be writing to me. And Dennis, like, forebode, like a foreshadowing potential of secrets for later on in the episode. He says, some lass that you kept quiet from the rest of us. And Wayne says, Nev, Barry reckons he's found the answer to your desire for extraterrestrial activities. And he says, you what? And Barry says, extramural. You know, they've both got it wrong. And Wayne says, he says we should form a group. Dennis is like, a group, whatever next. And Barry says, why not? So Wayne starts imagining what this group would look like. And he says, I'll be the lead singer, obviously on account of my magnetism and my charismatic charm. Who else plays in it? Barry says, I had a clarinet once, but I could only play half of Blue Moon. And Dennis makes a joke and he says, put Magowan down for drums. He
likes hitting things, yeah.
He likes hitting things. And Oz says, I think I can play them. I play the mouth organ, I think. Anyway, Nev reveals the letter. It's from Colin.
Yeah.
And he says, Colin Latham, the lad from the army that we met. And Dennis says, has he done a runner again? And he says, no, he's settled in very well, thanks to us. He's coming over on a 36-hour pass, and he's bringing 3 of his mates, once a match, Army versus Civvies. And Dennis says, that's the answer to your prayer, Bonnie lad. Oz says, canny idea. And Neville says, say is a darts match. And everyone's like, oh, that's a good idea, that's a good idea. And straight away, Neville, negative Neville, he's like, I'm no good at darts. And Moxie's like, well, I'm in the team, it's my board. Yeah. Moxie's straight away like the kid, it's my ball and nobody else can play with it. So, cuts to the bar and Magowan.
Yeah.
Magowan is drinking heavily, as usual. And Oz enters the bar and he says, how are you, Mac? Heard you had a bit of bother the other night. And straight away, Magowan again on the defensive. I wasn't looking for any trouble.
Yeah.
And Oz says, no, that's usually the case. Do you want a drink? Magowan says, yeah, I'll have a schnapps there. Schnapps, eh? He says, two schnapps here. And there's one already on the bar, and Magowan picks it up and
yeah.
And
believe me, that's the way he drinks in real life as well.
Yeah, it's probably real drink. Do you reckon they gave him the real drink as well? And he says, so when you're up in front of the beak then? And he says, sometime next week. He says, you'll probably get a fine, bound over or something. Anyway, Magowan, he says, you never know where you are with these Erics. They're going to stuff it to me. That being a Brit, they've thrown me out.
Very vindictive, yeah.
They've thrown me out of the hostel. And I was like, he says, they're waiting for that chance. They're very, very vindictive. And he's like Magowan, he's drinking, he turns around, he starts looking at the Germans. He's like, they're very, very vindictive. What does he say? Your average, Eric. And then Oz, of all people,
it just starts defending the Erics.
Something's bad when Oz starts to defend the Germans. And Oz says, he says, look, he says they're not all bad. He says,
they live and let live.
Where are we? He says, he says, where is it? That's it. That's it. You never know where he says, he says, yeah, that's it. Let's be fair. I mean, you can't really blame the Germans, can you? I mean, live and let live. That's what I always say. I mean, your average German's all right. I mean, compared to a Turk, aye?
Better than the Turks.
Yeah, so, like I say, he has, Oz is jumping to the defense of the Germans, and the barman is obviously, the barman cuts him a dirty look in that. And Magowan, again, protesting his innocence. It was the Germans that started that fight the other night. They provoked me. And Oz just says, well, that's probably disputable, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Magowan says, hey, whose side are you on then? So Oz has a little sip of his drink and he says, nobody's. He says, I'm just saying, I mean, it's not the first time it's happened, is it? Your record out here is not exactly untarnished. And Magowan says, oh, maybe. And he downs the next schnapps and he asks for 2 more. And he says, Magowan says, I mean, I'm no worse than most, I mean, back on my own turf,
I'm very popular.
I'm a very popular bloke. He says, Lestways, no one's ever said they didn't like me, Now and then I can get a bit cantankerous, now and then. And Oz says, but I mean, how often's now and then? And Magowan says, Fridays. He says, oh, peer nights like. Magowan says, right, and downs another shot of schnapps. And Oz says, look, it must be the drink. Matt.
Oh, this is one of the best lines, I think, as well,
He says, I mean, it's a demon with some blokes, And Magowan says, this fight the other night, I just had about 10 pills,
That's it, can't be in the drink.
So it can't have been the drink. So he's had 10.
Obviously, yeah.
He's had 10 beers and probably at least 10 of them shots.
Oh,
And
yeah.
you know, that's enough drink to put someone on their arse. And so clearly, you know, Magowan is you know, he's just one of them people that, you know, reacts badly to the drink. And you know, if anyone shouldn't drink, it should be him. But yeah, he says, so it can't. I only had 10 pills and a few schnapps, so it can't have been the drink. So they are back in the hut and they are practicing darts. So they're going to start taking this darts match really seriously. And Dan straight up says, right, you know, it's got to be the best 4 players on merit, regardless of anything else. And straight away he turns to Moxie and he says, that includes whose board it is, right? And you know, Barry says, fair's fair. And he says, all right. And Moxie agrees. He says, all right, agreed. And Dennis says, are you in, Wayne? And Wayne's like, nah, you can count me out. I'm not into games. It's bad for the image. Whatever that means. And he says, no, I'm just no good at darts. Neville's like, I'm just no good at darts. I never have been. Negative Neville once again. And Dennis says, you know, we've got to have the best team. We've got to give the soldiers a run for their money. And Moxie straight away is like, there will be money on it, won't he? And Dennis says, no doubt. So what we'll do is we'll have eliminators, we'll get the best 4, and then we'll practice like hell. Barry says, you know, automatically assuming Nev is nice. He says, never mind, Nev. He says, you want us to have the best team though, didn't you? And Neville just straight out just says, not if I'm not in it. You know? So you know, Neville's like, you know, all for playing games, and then all of a sudden he's like, you know, he's got no, he's not interested in having the best team. He just wants to take part. It's a bit selfish. So Barry, the famous line says, "You can be the manager then." That's like the shit role that you give to the person that's no good. Anyway, Moxie scores a 69, and he says, look, you know, Barry's like, the important thing is what it's doing for the hut, morale and such, like unifying us in a common goal. That what you wanted, that's what's important.
Yeah.
Neville's, reluctantly agrees and says, I suppose so. And Wayne says, Barry's right, reaffirming the harmony of the hut. Anyway, Oz, here we come. Oz comes in. How, lads, you'll never guess what happened. They chuck Magowan out of his hostel. And Dennis is like, I'm not surprised. And I bet they were only too glad to get rid. And wouldn't be much harmony in the hostel with him about. So I told him, so Oz drops the clanger. He says, so I told him we could keep down here for a bit. How are you in, Mac? And Magowan enters the hut. And everyone is like, yeah, no one's too.
You see, Oz isn't intimidated by Gowan, isn't he? Magowan at all, really. So he's, you know,
a little bit he is, but they're very much, like they're cut from the same cloth, but like McGowan's just a more extreme version of Oz. So so they are bound to, I don't know, because Oz says later on, he says, I wouldn't see a man without a bed. I'm like, yeah, well, so is that actually Oz being a nice guy? Or is that actually Oz maybe he's been a little bit intimidated by McGowan? And
well, a little bit, yeah. But I mean, from all of them, Oz is the less intimidating, isn't he? Yeah.
And I mean, or is Oz just that fucking stupid that he doesn't realise that that what he's doing is absolutely ridiculous? So anyway, the next morning, everyone's getting ready, and Moxie's making the tea, and Moxie's like, tea's up, and McGowan says, hey, and Barry says, where's the bog? And Oz says, I'm on my way, Mac, I'll show you, I'm having a shave. I don't know what it is. They for a bunch of builders, they seem to like shaving a lot, don't they? Me personally, I'm not a fan. So Dennis says to Oz, he says, look, can I have a word? Oz says, I'm going for a shave, and he says, look, it won't take a minute. So Oz comes back and he says, he shows McGowan where the toilet hut is. And he comes back to Dennis. He says, what do you want now? And Dennis says, what do we want now? He says, it's him. What on earth possessed you to bring him here? And he says, well, Dennis, he had nowhere else to go. And Dennis straight up, he says, well, that's his hard lines. He brought that on himself. He says, well, you can't see a bloke without a bed, man, Den. He says, him you can. You're better off buying him a cage, says Wayne. He says he even snores aggressively.
Yeah.
And Neville says he's going to make all of our lives a misery. And Oz says, well, he can't make your life much more of one, can he? So again, you know, Oz calling out Neville on his negative life living. And Barry says, look, leave Nev alone. Nev's right. Nev is. He says he's going to spoil everything he is. And Oz says he's only one person, man. And Dennis says, look, man, we've just about got used to living with each other, right? Now, it hasn't been easy, but we've managed. Now, you've gone and bollocksed everything up by asking him. And Wayne says, yeah, we're not a bleeding halfway house, man. And Barry's firmly, Barry, no, he's got to go. He's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Wayne says, oh, yeah, you're going to tell him that. Is that it? You're going to tell him, is that it? And Barry's like, no, I thought Bomber would.
Bomber's not there.
Like, yeah, Moxie's like, terrific. Bomber's not back till next week. And Barry's like, all right, then we'll get up a delegation, right? We can write a strongly worded protest.
Yeah, that's going to work.
And then Dennis can go, and Dennis says, Dennis can what? All right, Dennis can tell him to naff off, and Dennis can get his head thumped. And Wayne says, oh, well, you know, we'll all back you up, though. And Barry says, no, Dennis has got a point. And Oz says, well, I don't know what all the fuss is about. He's not a bad bloke. Yeah. And I compared to other violent psychopaths, I suppose he isn't. He says, Oz says, you know, you've just got to know how to handle him, man. And he says, well, no one else has, have they? He's done previous, you know. And Neville says, has he? He says, yeah, some of the lads told me. Barry says, what for? And Wayne says, well, I should hardly think it's income tax evasion.
Yeah.
Moxie says, grievous bodily harm, more like. And so Dennis says to Oz, he says, look, you asked him here, right? You can get shot of him. And Oz says, all right, man, knee skin off my nose. And he says, it will be if you don't ask him right. So Dennis goes to Herr Grunwald.
Yeah, in the office.
And he's, he's obviously wants to protest the fact that he's been lumbered. And he says, you know, I don't think it's fair that I'm held responsible for every British workman on this site. Which is, you know, very, very true. And Grunwald says, you know, well, I am not responsible for how you behave. Look, you people come over here, we give you work, but you are not registered, you are self-employed. So if you cause trouble, then you must go, unless you correct it amongst yourselves. And so Grunwald's being very fucking gloaty. And Grunwald thinks he's fucking, you know, thinks he's done the funniest job here by palming it off on someone else. And Dennis says, look, you know, my lot don't cause any trouble. And Grunwald says, they are not saints. And he says, well, we're a canny set of lads. It's just that Magowan. And Grunwald says, he is not German worker. He is Englander. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is the thing. They keep calling him an Englander, right? And he's got an Irish accent that sometimes flaunts into it.
Slips into other things, yeah.
But again, you know, if he's a paddy, again, that would have been another reason. I'd have been like, he's fucking Irish, mate. Get rid of him. But yeah, so Dennis suggests, he says he could sack him. And Grunwald turns it straight round the slimy prick and he says, does you know you suggest this? I think it better he does not, yeah. And Dennis says, look, he's ended up in our hut now, man. And Grunwald, like all gloaty and smug, he says, good, then you can keep a close watch.
Yeah.
And Dennis is like, oh, fuck, I smashing. So Dennis leaves the admin hut and he sees Oz. And he says, oi, he says, and Oz says, what do you want? I'm away for a bevy. And he says, have you told Magowan yet? And he says, no, I haven't had a chance. I've been working, he's been working on the West Block tonight in the hut without fail. And Dennis says, you better be, and all. And Oz says, I'll do it tonight. So Nev, he's writing down, and Nev's looking at looking at something and he's writing something down.
Yeah.
And it looks like he's writing down the details of a hookah that's got an advert in the newsagent. And
That's
so
it, yeah.
Barry turns up and he says, I've got the English papers. Are you all right? And Nev says yes. He says, what you got there? He says, nothing. He says, do you mind hanging on while I get some more postcards? And Barry looks in the window and he sees the hookah's advert. And so Barry's putting two and two together to make 5 once.
Yeah.
So, like I say, Wayne is, they're back in the hut. Wayne's wringing out his waterlogged socks and he's complaining. He says, I'm running out of socks. I'm working in all that water. I'm going to get foot rot. And Moxie says, at least you're indoors. It's freezing out there today. And then obviously Magowan enters the hut and he stares at Wayne. Like he gives Wayne the evil eye. And Magowan says, the tea on, is it? And Moxie says, you can make some. And, even like suggesting that he makes the tea. Magowan's like, hey. And Moxie says, if you want. Magowan says, I'm not that bothered. And then he puts his bag down, opens the stove, spits in it, and then puts the lid back on the stove. And Wayne subtly tries to, he says, are you kipping here again tonight, are you? Yeah. And Magowan's like, where am I supposed to be kipping? And Wayne, I just wondered, And Magowan says, I didn't sleep too well last night. The bed's too small. And it's like, Wayne's like, oh dear. Anyway, Magowan, Magowan's again intimidating Barry. And Oz comes into the hut. And Wayne, he says hello, and Wayne straight away he says, "Have you had a word with who about what?" And he says, "Well, I was just about to." And he says, "Well, go on then." So Oz is like, "Mac," and Magowan's throwing darts, and he says, "What?" And he says, "Well, it's about you being here." And he says, "What about me being here?" And he says, "Well, there's not that much room, really, is there?" And Magowan's like, I know, I've got to rough it." Like, as if he's the one that's being badly treated. And Oz says, "No, but the thing is, and then he looks up and he sees Magowan's scored a treble 20. And he says, "Dear me, you can't half chuck an arrow, can you?" Magowan says, "I never get beat me." And he says, "Dear me, that's marvellous." And he says, Dennis comes in, he goes, "Dennis, come here, have a look at this." And he says the worst thing. He says, "Mac's just the bloke we need in here." Yeah. And Oz says, "I've got this darts match coming up against the army." And Dennis is like, "Oh, for fuck's sake," like rolls his eyes. And Magowan, that's it. He's seen the opportunity. And Magowan says, "Well, it's lucky
I'm staying here.
Lucky for you to stay in here, isn't it?" And Dennis looks at Oz and he, like, under his breath, he just says, "You prick." He's like, "You prick." And Oz is like, "Eh?" And it's like, Oz has just completely fucked it all up again. Anyway, so Dennis, he goes to Magowan and it's down to Dennis now. And he says,
the leader.
Yeah, he says, "Look, mate, the thing is, we don't really want you in this hut." And Oz fucking bottles it. Oz backs away. Magowan's all, "Who says?" And he says, "Well, all of us. I'm speaking for all of us." He says, "How come?" He says, "Well, it's nothing personal. Like, we don't mind you keeping here for a couple of nights, but you see, us lads, we've got things pretty much together amongst ourselves, and we don't want anyone keeping here on a permanent basis." And everyone promised they would back him up, and all of a sudden they fucking blink away like cockroaches. And he's like, "Isn't that right, lads?" And Wayne says, yeah, right. I mean, we're all mates and everything, ain't we? And Moxie says, we've got used to each other. And Barry's like, yeah, it's nothing personal, as Dennis said.
Question of harmony.
Yeah. And again, like, Magowan knows that Barry's soft as shite. And he again, intimidates Barry by just standing close to him.
Yeah.
And Magowan says, "You don't want me staying here, is that what you're saying?" And Barry bottles it. He's like, "Oh, well, not in so many words. No, it's like a question of harmony, isn't it? It's the question. It's not easy for a bunch of grown men that's staying and sleeping under one roof, especially when it lets the wet in." And Barry's terrified. And Magowan says, "So you lot want me out, do you?" And Dennis nods. And then Oz again. He says, well, you know, after the darts match, at least let him stay for the darts match. Dennis is like, oh, he says, Oz, that's got bugger all to do with it. And he says, and McGowan straight up, he says, and say I don't want to go, are you going to physically eject me? And he gives Dennis a shove. Says, is that it? And Dennis says, look, none of us is capable of doing that, as you well know. McGowan says, just as well you do know that. Dennis just said, you know, Dennis is trying to be the voice of reason. Says it'd just be best all round if you left, you know, I'm just telling you straight, you know, because that's how we prefer it. And McGowan says, well, where am I supposed to go? Hey, come here, you've got all the answers. You know, again, like, you know, McGowan's just one of them people that, you know, nothing's ever his fault. And it's like, you know, it's like, you know, he's a grown man and he's like that. Well, where am I going to go? And yeah, it's, you know, absolutely ridiculous. And he says, McGowan says, what do you take me for? You? I mean, I don't bother anybody. And Barry says, well, would the hostel take you back? He says, no chance. All I did was break a chair.
Someone's head.
All I did was break a chair over the warden's head. And Dennis says, well, that's the sort of person we take you for, you know. I mean, that's the point, like. And McGowan's like, I don't do gaffers. I don't like being told what to do and where to do it. He throws the darts like aggressive. Barry cowers away. And Wayne says, you know, well, that's why it wouldn't work out here, would it? I mean, we're sticklers for the rules and regulations. We are, son. Got to abide by the house rules, see? And then Dennis says, well, you know, you could get a flat on your own. That's your best bet, surely. And then McGowan brings up the subject of money. He says, a flat will cost me, won't it? Advance against breakages. And Wayne, forgetting where he is for a second, I think he says, which in your case wouldn't be returnable, would it? And he laughs. And again, McGowan squares him up and he says, no offense, Squire, it's just a joke. And McGowan says, don't you clown with me, Ducky. Ducky, I don't know where he gets that from. And, you know, he's got Wayne's back's up against the lockers. And Dennis says, you know, a flat's your best bet. Maybe we can help you out, yeah? And McGowan says, if I get a flat, you can say goodbye to the scratch that you put up for me.
A scratch. That's great.
You won't see that again. And he gets in Wayne's face and he says, just think about that. So, yeah. So like I say, so then they, you know, Wayne and Barry are walking down by the river and Neville and Dennis and Oz are in the bar. And Neville says, you know, I can't believe this. We want him out, but he stays. Dennis says, we've got no choice. And he says, well, we've got a choice. We just have to shift his arse and we'll get, you know, we'll back you up. And Oz says, you know, Dennis has already tried that and we didn't see you kicking around backing him up. And Dennis says, you kept your distance. And Neville claims he didn't know he was away down the town. And Dennis says, you know, all right, well, don't jump the gun. So Dennis points out, he says, if he does go, you can kiss goodbye to whatever he owes us. You know, we've seen the last of that. And Oz pipes up and he says, all that money. Dennis says, well, you didn't chip in. And Oz is like, I was skinned. And yeah, so, you know, I think we worked it out that the bail was probably, you know, 300-500 quid, something like that. Yeah. They probably all had to stick in at least a day's wages. And then Neville says, you know, it's all because of that rotten darts match. And Dennis, you know, you can blame Oz for that. And he says, I am. And then, you know, Oz and Neville seem to get into a bit of a tiff. You know, Oz accuses Neville of being sour grapes because he's not in the darts team. And he says, I couldn't care less. And he says, yes, you could. And bollocks. And, you know, and it was you that wanted outside interests. And he's like, well, darts isn't an outside interest and something to do. And you know, they're very, you know, and they get to the point where he's like, it's my business, your business, suit yourself. Sorry, you know, sorry I asked, suit yourself, suits me, Anyway, so they're arguing like a couple of kids, and Dennis says, look, knock it on the head, you're like a couple of bairns. What's the matter? Is he pinched your crayons? And Neville, with the most mature answers, like, well, he started it, and nods and nods, like, I never started it. And Dennis says, you know, if you two forgot, we were supposed to be mates. We came out here together and we vowed to stick together no matter what. It'll be like, I'll be the first to admit that I didn't think that we'd make it. But we've managed so far. We've had a fair share of trials and tribulations and a fair amount of shit's been hied our way. We've come out unscathed. None the worse. Right? And, so Neville and Oz are sorry, sorry, Oz, And Dennis says, we all know whose fault it is, and he's not even here. Neville says, there must be some way we can get shot of him. And Oz, in his fantasy world, he says, well, in America, in the underworld, the mafia,
bury the bodies, yeah.
Yeah, they do away with the bodies of their victims. They bury them in concrete. He says, so what? He says, so what? We work on a building site, don't we? And so Oz's idea is they're going to top Magowan and bury him in the foundations of these gaffs that they're building. So anyway, Herr Grunwald pulls up, and it's quite funny. He pulls up in the car, and there's like the sort of the German
music again.
Yeah. But it's like if you shut your eyes and you listen to that music, you'd think you were like listening to a war movie or something with like like you say, the head of the SS or the Gestapo or whatever. And anyway, so Herr Grunwald sees Dennis and he says, "Morning, Patterson." This morning he says, "Everything is ship shape, as your expression says." Dennis says it could be worse, and Herr Grunwald's gloating. He's like, 3 days, no problems with Magowan or German workers.
He in your care.
No police complaining. Very good that he is in your care. And Dennis is like, oh, for fuck's sake, he's making a run from his own back. So you see Neville going into town on the tram, and then Wayne and Barry are sitting having a drink in a bar, and Barry says, I enjoyed that flick, and Wayne's like, yeah, I always did like a good Chinese film with German voices. And Barry says, yeah, it doesn't matter much with these martial arts stories, does it? It's the mayhem and the gratuitous violence that counts. So Wayne says, maybe we should take up karate. That might get rid of you-know-who. And Barry talks about his fantasies about bringing Bruce Lee. And he says, I have fantasies about bringing Bruce Lee, don't you? And Wayne says, no, he can't sing. So Barry says he'd really like to be able to chop a brick in half, smash it right in half. Wouldn't you like to do that? And Wayne's not interested. No, not a lot. Barry says it would be great, though, wouldn't it? Just wants to be confronted by bloodthirsty hooligans and dispose of them with a few timely chops to the neck. He says, I've always wanted to be able to do that, especially after a Wolves game, when I found myself hemmed in by hordes of rampant skinheads. And it's out of character for Barry. And Wayne says, you constantly surprise me, you do, Barry. Yeah, beneath that passive exterior beats the heart of a would-be ninja. And he doesn't know what that is. He's like, yeah. He says, what's in? He says, yeah. He says, yeah. He says, well, what's a ninja? He says, a ninja. I thought you'd have known that. In your martial arts fraternity, none is more deadly than the ninja. He says, yeah, really? He says, yeah, it's the ultimate, son. Just one look, right, can fill a man with dread. And Barry says, bit like Magowan. Yeah. And Wayne says, no, he's no ninja. He's a certifiable lunatic, he is. And Barry says, well, he's certainly kept us out the hut, hasn't he? That's my third film in 3 days. And then they see Neville.
Yeah, looking cagey.
Looking cagey, and he's outside the porn cinema, isn't he?
Yeah.
And Wayne says, isn't that Nev? And he says, where? And he says, look, outside the porn. And he says, yeah. He says, where's he off to? Or where's he been more like? And he says, been very cagey the last few days. And he says, I'm sure I've seen him come out that place across the street there. And Barry said, what place? He says, the porn cinema. And he's like, no. He's like, yeah. He said, well, that's weird. That is. He goes, because the other day I caught Nev copying out an ad from a shop window. And he's like, really? What was the ad for? He goes, I don't know, but it was things like flats and flagellation. And he's like, no, it's straight up. He said, well, Nev's obviously found himself an outside interest, has he? So Barry and Oz are now practicing for the darts match.
Yeah.
And Oz, Barry's throwing the darts, and Oz is like, treble, double 20 and 25. He's like 65. And Barry claims, he's like, I'm getting good. I could make the team. And I was like, it's too late now. What he decided to do is playing. It's me, Dennis, Magowan, and Moxie. Barry's like, oh, Moxie's only in it because it's his board. And Moxie takes great offence. He's like, hey, I heard that. And Barry's like, so he says, it's not true. Look, we played the aggregate all week, right? I qualified fair and square. And he says, yeah, but only by the skin of your teeth. He says, yeah, but I still qualified though. So Moxie's very proud of the fact that he's actually made the team. And Wayne's like, bloody hell, you'd think it was the Olympics. Maybe Oz is counting, Oz is counting up, and then he does his little, he says, Oz, you require double 16. And then Moxie says, oh, you could be the scorer, Barry. Barry says, bug off, that's Nev's privilege, isn't it? Well, after all, he arranged it. And he says, Nev's picking up the soldiers, he says, at 3 o'clock at the station. And Wayne says, we better organise the booze then. He says, yeah, we can arrange it on the dining table, can't we? And Barry says, let's get some crisps. It's like, nice and festive. What about some balloons as well? And then Barry scores 13, and Oz says, I thought you said you were improving. And Barry claims, he says, he was putting me off with his sarcasm, didn't he? Blaming Wayne. And Oz wants a double 8. Moxie's like, all right, Nev, let her on your bed. He says, it's probably from Brenda, wondering why our money's short this week. And he says, is that why you're putting in so much overtime then? So it's obviously Nev's out been working on a Saturday morning. And he says it's not for the love of it. And Oz misses his double 8. And Barry tries to laugh. And he says, oh, you choked. And he says, let's see what you want. And he says, you want double 8 and I want. And Oz says 219. Barry thinks he's being funny, but whereas in fact he is getting soundly beaten. And then Neville opens the letter and he says, it's from Colin. He says, they've got a dress parade tomorrow. He's not coming over until Monday instead. He says, well, it's no, that's no good. It's no fun unless it's the weekend. And says, we'll give him more time to practice. And Barry misses the board completely and Oz takes the piss. He says, nice shot, Barry. 1 in the 5, 1 in the 4, and 1 in the wall. And so Neville suggests, he says, let's get the booze today. Nobody will have any money left come Monday. Has Magowan paid us anything back yet? And Wayne's like, has he what? And Neville's quite determined. He says, I want what he owes. There's no reason why I should have to work Saturday mornings and Brenda go short for the likes of him, is there? And then Oz hits his double. So, and Neville's, he says, there's no reason why I should subsidise him. And then Wayne makes a bit of a schneity comment. I suppose you do need a bit of an extra crack these days. And he says, what's that supposed to mean? And he says, well, you are going downtown a lot. Must be costing you whatever it is you're doing. And Neville's like, well, that's my business. And Wayne's like, well, of course it is. Mm-hmm. So they go to the bar to buy the beer, which is a bit strange. You'd think that they would be buying it at the supermarket, wouldn't you?
Yeah, it'd be a bit cheaper, wouldn't it?
Well, exactly. Unless, the guy's done them a deal or whatever.
Yeah. Adolf, yeah.
Adolf, haven't I? But again, so then, they've bought the cases there and they say, and Barry says, no crisps. We've got to get crisps. Then it's just, oh man, we'll get them on Monday, Barry and
soak up the 20 bottles of beer.
Yeah. So Oz comes in and he says, did you get the spirits? And he says, why, aye. And he produces 2 bottles from under his jacket, places them on the crates, snaps in a bottle of vodka, smashing. Now, do you think Oz robbed them bottles?
I think so, yeah.
I mean, they were. It looked like a shoplifter's. Effort there.
Yeah.
But yeah. So anyway, Neville says that should be enough, and Dennis says it depends if the army lads drink as much as us lads. Listen, that lot's not to be touched till Monday, right? And Oz is straight away. He's like, hang on a minute. If we're going to carry all this back out of the hut, I think we deserve a drink. He's like, no, we've got it in now, man. It's insurance against anyone's reckless spending, right? Not one drop of this will be touched by anyone, including Magowan. And so they all start walking out the bar where they pick up the crates, and they're walking out. And Moxie reveals, says, that's no problem. He's pissed off. When he heard the darts had been cancelled, he said he wouldn't be back till tomorrow. And Dennis is like, did he?
Oh.
He says, you mean, Barry says, we've got a night's reprieve. And he says, well, it looks like it. So Dennis is suddenly cheered up. He said, right, if that's the case, it's my round. he puts the drink down and he says, "What do you want to drink?" And so they go and have a drink. And everyone cheers up a little bit. But straight away, Noz is like, and then we'll get stuck into the vodka when we get back. Because let's celebrate. So Dennis orders the beers. So they're back at the swimming baths, Barry and Neville. And they obviously, this is the next morning. So they've obviously had a skinful that night. And Barry says, it does you good that I feel great now. And Neville says, better than I did earlier. Says, I shouldn't drink spirits, me. And Barry says, mind you, we did have cause for celebration last night. And then they've done what they said they weren't going to do. He says, we'll have to restock before the lads arrive tomorrow. And Barry says, do you fancy a jar or are you going into town? So Barry's subtly trying to find out what Nev's doing. And Nev just says later, and Barry says later. And Nev says, I want to go back to the hut. I want to see if Magowan's there. I want what I'm owed. And
Good luck.
Yeah, exactly. Barry quite sensibly says, take it easy, Nev. Let's face it, if we don't want to cough up, he ain't going to, is he? And Neville, he says, it seems that everyone's too intimidated by him. You often find with blokes like that, all you got to do is face up to them. You don't have to be his size, just face him out. And then Barry. He does
a bit of a move, doesn't he? A bit of a move.
Well, he's like, starts doing karate chops. Barry's, living in this little fantasy that he can karate chops things. And he karate chops the locker door. The locker door. So obviously, I don't know whether it's his locker or whatever. And then he starts going, excuse me. So he's obviously, locked his stuff in the locker. So they go back to the hut. And Magowan walks in the hut and back down. And Barry just says to Magowan, he says, where's the lads gone? And Magowan says, down the pub, I should think. And Barry, trying to make conversation, he's like, did you have a nice time? Magowan says, oh yeah, nice time, aye. And then Neville's...
You have a fight.
Well, the thing is, I don't know, like Neville's obviously not a tough lad, but he's also, he's not, he swung that punch at Wayne and, he's still a Geordie from a working class upbringing.
Yeah.
No, he's not what you would consider a hard man, but he's also, he seems to have this attitude that he's not going to be pushed around.
Yeah.
But, there are certain times where standing up for yourself's a good thing. There are also certain times where, discretion is the better part of that.
Yeah. Take a back seat.
So anyway, and Neville, straight away says, why did you have a fight? And Magowan says, well, what's that supposed to mean? He says, well, isn't that your usual way of having a good time? And Barry just, he's like, it's a joke, innit? Magowan says, I must have been paralytic if my head's any clue. And Barry said, where'd you stay? And Magowan reveals, he says, over the river, I've got this bird. I gave her a right seeing to. You would have been proud of me. And then he notices the beers and he goes, Christ.
Oh, yeah. He homes in on those. Yeah.
Well, Neville tries to stop him and he says, that's for tomorrow night for the match. And Magowan pushes Neville out the way. And he says, you're not going to miss a couple of bottles, are you? And he gets a bottle out of the crate and he opens it. And Neville says, no, but we've all chipped in for that, did you? And Magowan's like, well, I never invited them. He says, no, but they're our guests. He says, look, I'll win that darts match for you, all right. Put some money on that. You'll get it all back. And Neville starts, like, the thing is, if you're going to stand up to someone, you've got to be prepared for the outcome. If you offer someone an ultimatum, you better be fucking ready for whatever's going to be said afterwards. You know what I mean? And Neville thinks that by standing up to Magowan, he's instantly going to walk away and he's going to say, sorry, that's not the case. And Neville says, I want what you owe me, what you owe all of us. And Barry's like, shits himself. I'm all right. I'm okay. I've got something put aside, And Magowan says, you want what back, kid? And he says, just what you owe for the bail, like. McGowan says, look, if I'm going to get a flat, I'm going to need that money, aren't I, as a deposit? That was all agreed. And Neville says, well, I never agreed. And McGowan, says, talk to that wet nurse of yours. Patterson, he'll put you straight. And Neville's like, I don't care what the others agreed. I want my money back. And McGowan obviously knows he's in the wrong. And he's like, just drop it, will you? And Barry says, Nev, I think you better leave it. I think Mac's getting the needle. And McGowan says, I only get the needle when I drink. And Neville says, Dutch courage, you mean? So McGowan slams the bottle down and he squares up and he says, look, Geordie, if you want to make something of it, I'll bloody kill you. And he says to Barry, he says, that goes for you and all. And he gives Neville a shove. And Neville, Neville's like, don't shove me. And Magowan goes, no, and he shoves him. And Neville says, hey. And he shoves McGowan back. Well,
that's it.
Like I say,
in the stomach.
You start something. Well, he nuts him first. So McGowan sticks the nut on him and then punches him in the stomach.
All right.
So but that's what I'm saying is, the bottom line is it's all well and good to stand up for yourself, but you've got to be prepared to deal with the fallout, which way it happens.
Run away fast.
Ideally, we'll find a diplomatic solution, but if not, it's it's definitely could be could go the wrong way. So so like I say, he nuts Neville, punches him, and Neville collapses, and Barry's like, oh, you leave him alone. And McGowan steps forward and Barry does his usual cowardice self, and Neville's on the floor coughing and retching and clutching his stomach. McGowan grabs his coat and he says, I'll be back for the darts match. Pours his empty bottle of Barry and he walks out. So they basically they cut to the bar, and obviously Barry's gone over there and explained to the lads what's happening. Dennis is very upset, and he's like, and he hit him. And Barry said, didn't he just? And Oz is like, right, that's it. He's no match for all of us, really. We'll go and kick the living shit out of him.
Oz will do it. Yeah.
And he says, too bloody true. And Barry says, he's gone. He says, gone where? And he says, well, he's got this bird, hasn't he? And he says, well, he'll be back, won't he? Not today, he won't. He says, well, that's all right. He'll keep the bastard. And Dennis is like, let's not worry about him. Let's go and see Neville. And then Barry says, Neville's gone and all. And he's like, why? He says, well, you know what Neville's like. He's taking it all on himself. And he says, Moxie says, did he say where he was going? And, he says, town. And he says, well, we'll all have to get a hold of him. He says, you know what he's like. Dennis, he says he'll bottle it all up and he'll get himself into a right depressed state. And Oz agrees he will that. And Moxie says, how are we going to find him? And Wayne says, well, we might know where he is, Barry? And Barry says, it's a long shot, but he might be. And Dennis says, where might be where? And Barry's like, Wayne look a bit sheepish. And he says, if you know where, tell us. Where is he, man? And so they head down to the porn cinema.
Have you seen that? I mean, what it says outside on the cinema says, Kino sex. Is that like, I've been in those places in Amsterdam. It's like is it cubicle?
Oh,
No, Kino. I don't know what that word is, but
well, Kino that's like it's kind of bingo, isn't it? That they play in America. I don't know. It's it beggars belief sometimes on some of the things that people come up with, but it's definitely not. Like I say, I've been to one of them live sex shows in America.
Yeah.
But it was like you're sitting on it, like it's like a theater.
Theater,
it's not.
I've been pulled up on the stage.
Christ, I would definitely not be, in any way interested in getting in one of them little booths. Oh, could you imagine?
Oh.
Imagine going in there with a blue light and that. Oh, fuck no. I'm no prude.
Bit of a sticky situation, I'd imagine.
I'm no prude, but I am doing that. Yeah. And anyway, so they go down to the porn cinema, and Wayne says, in here, And Barry says, I think it's disgusting on a Sunday. Like, it's all right any other day of the week. But on Sunday, Barry thinks it's disgusting. And Dennis is like incredulous. He's like, in there? Anyway, so they all go in. They walk in. It's a dark room. There's a porn movie playing on the cinema, and there's like a topless waitress.
Yeah. It was after the 9 p.m. watershed in those days. So
yeah. And so that must be it. You know, you'll go in, you can sit and watch your porn, and there's a topless bird will bring you a drink and that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What more can
Heaven.
Yeah.
Heaven in the 80s.
Oh my good Lord. So anyway, Oz, subtle as a brick, as always, starts shouting, Neville. And then obviously everyone starts looking around and pushing around, and it causes a right kerfuffle, and all the punters are like, shh, shh, shh. Anyway, it cuts to outside, and Neville comes outside of the next door. And as it zooms in, and as you can see from the sign, it says guitar lessons. And so it's now cuts back inside, and it's all kicking off in the porn cinema. And so then the lights go up, and obviously Neville's not there. And Oz screams, he's not here, Dennis, is he? And Dennis is like, no, it doesn't look like it. But then all Dennis's prayers have been answered when Dennis spots Herr Grunwald. And he goes, hang on a minute, Herr Grunwald? And Oz says, what's he doing here? And Wayne leans over and he goes, hello, mein Capitan. He goes, I thought you spend Sunday with your family, eh? So they've spotted Herr Grunwald on his little dirty Sunday afternoon out.
His little dirty secret.
Yeah. So Wayne and Oz and Barry are sitting at a bar outside. That's actually in Dusseldorf. And Oz is, they're still debating about what Nev's been doing. And Oz says guitar lessons. And Barry's like, it could be a euphemism. And Wayne's like, oh yeah, acoustic or electric. And then Barry thinks he's, an English fucking professor, but he's not. He says, a euphemism, Wayne, is a polite way of being rude. Like saying piss off when you mean go away, which would obviously be the other, or saying Wayne instead of pillock. And Wayne quite aggressively says, watch it, you. And so Oz says, what do you reckon to the guitar lessons? And Barry still thinks, he says it's an advert for sexual services.
Yeah. He
says, you've seen the signs up in Soho. And Oz says, what, like French mistress seeks pupil for oral lessons. And they say, I wonder if Dennis has had any luck. And, and Oz says, where's Moxie? And Wayne said, he stayed behind to catch the end of that film. And Oz says, he's liable to catch more than a film in that flea pit. And it's got to be pretty rough if it's this place is below Oz's standards. So, I mean, that's how disgusting it is. But Moxie obviously quite felt at home. And Wayne, of course, the guitar has always been used as a phallic symbol. And Oz says, has it? Anyway, so Dennis arrives and he says, well, that little mystery sorted out. Neville left there 5 minutes ago. He says, and Barry says, you mean Neville has actually been in there straking his unnatural needs, whatever that means. And he says, apparently he was a regular customer, but he's kicked the habit now, And he says, what do you mean? And Dennis rolls up, he says, gentleman said he left his plectrum behind.
Plectrum, yeah.
So they cut back to the site, and Herr Grunwald, from having the black coat on that you mentioned before, George, now has this ridiculous yellow coat on, which is a full length, I don't know what you would call it, an oil skin. That's what they call it. On boats. So Herr Grunwald has got this yellow, ankle length trench coat on, and so they cut the toilet hut. Moxie's having a shave, and Barry comes out the toilet, and Moxie says, "Regular as ever, you are, Barry." And Barry's worried. He says, I haven't been this past week. He says, I think Magowan's upset my system. He says, he's still not back. And he says, he will be. His sort always is. And Moxie says, then it's high noon. And Barry says, no, not according to Dennis. It's not going to be. And Moxie says, really? He says, yeah, that's what he says. Moxie says, thank good for that. He says, I've already cut myself twice worrying about it. So Dennis, goes into the admin hut and he wants to go and
have a little word.
Wants to go and have a little word in Herr Grunwald's shell, like. And so he walks in and Dagmar's there. And Dagmar says, good morning. And Dennis is all very formal. He says, good morning, Dagmar. And Herr Grunwald's like, you can see the look on Herr Grunwald's face. He's fucking shitting himself, isn't he? He's like, oh, he's going to tell everyone and da.
Pending doom.
And Grunwald says, you wish something? And Dennis is very formal. He says, just a word in your ear, sir. So Herr Grunwald turns to Dagmar and he basically says something about, he says, Tas Cafe. So I'm assuming he says, can you go and get me a cup of coffee? And Dagmar's like, oh, the coffee's not ready yet or whatever. This is all in German. And then he's trying to find an excuse to get her out the office. And he gives her the car key and he says, go and check my car or, whatever, or go and buy the coffee somewhere else or whatever. And basically gets Dagmar to go out of the office so he can speak in secret with Dennis. And then he obviously go into the office. He says, follow me. And he says, Patterson, yes, Patterson, what is it? And Dennis assures him, he says, not a word, not one word will be heard by any of my lads. Not to no one, not to the Brits, not to the Erics, not to nobody. You have my solemn oath. And he says, but all of your hot nose. Dennis, very, very shrewdly, he says, well, all except Magowan.
Yeah.
But the rest of the lads, I promise you. However, if Magowan does find out, his silence, I kind of guarantee it.
Yeah.
And Grunwald's like, so? And Dennis says, it'd be best all round if Magowan left. And Grunwald's like, for what excuse can I give? He is a good worker.
Yeah.
And Dennis just looks at him and smiles and says, you'll think of something. So Dennis gets what he wants. And then Dennis is walking out of the admin hut and Dagmar's walking back in and he gives her a sly peck on the cheek. So obviously reaffirms the fact that his relationship with Dagmar is obviously going very, very well. And so they're back on the site and Dennis is obviously very happy. All the lads are laying the bricks and Dennis is singing away to himself. And Oz notices and he says, you're very chipper today, Dennis. And he says, aye, not bad. And Neville says, it sounds like he knows something we don't. And Dennis says, well, we've all got to have our little secrets, Neville. No need to tell you about that. And Neville says, well, my secret's out. Fat chance for you lot. And Oz is like, I don't know why you had to make such a big secret of it in the first place, mate. And Neville says, well, I wanted to get half proficient at it, buy myself a guitar and surprise you. And Oz says, what, like at the Christmas party, like? And Neville's like, had a way, man. And Dennis says, I hope laying bricks isn't going to damage your hands, mind you. And Oz says, you better get them insured if you're going to be the next Eric Clapton. And Neville says, I'll surprise you yet. So then we finally see, so Magowan's obviously been called into the office. He leaves the office and he's got a face like a well-smacked horse.
Wouldn't fancy having that conversation with him.
No, and he comes up where the lads are working. He starts packing away his tools and Dennis innocently says, where are you off to? And Magowan says, I got me cards from Grunwald. And Oz says, what for? And he says, he's heard through the grapevine the judge is going to do me when I go up. He says, make an example or something. And Dennis says, never.
They'd always stuff it to me.
Yeah, and he says apparently, apparently I told you they'd stuff it to me, didn't I? Vindictive bastards. And Dennis says, yeah, well, you're best off going home. It's better than being in the clink. Magowan says, suppose so, and starts to walk off. And Oz says, so long, mate. And Neville pipes up and he says, you'll not be missed. Neville getting a bit brave in front of the lads, obviously. And Magowan comes back and he says, that's your bail money up the spout, kid. Like as if before he said that, he was going
to get it.
Yeah. He's like, Neville just ruined it. And so he's walking off and he picks up like it looks like a monkey wrench or something. He picks up like a thing, and Magowan throws it through the window. And anyway, so the horn, so like he breaks the window, and then the horn blows, and that sort of horn not only signifies the end of the working day, but signifies the end of the Magowan era.
Yeah.
And so the it's the end of the day, and Dennis is going back to the hut, but Dennis purposely walks past the admin hut, and he sees Herr Grunwald getting in his car, and he says, "Herr Grunwald," and Grunwald says yes, and Dennis gives him a little thumbs up, and he just says,
nice one. Yeah.
So they're back in the hut, and Wayne says, "What time are the army arriving?" Earl says, "About 6 o'clock." He says, "I better get a move on." Barry says, "We'll go down on the bike and follow us back in a taxi." And Oz is like, "It should be a good night, and you're in the team after all, Nev." And Neville, now he's like, "Oh, that's not important." Anyway, so they enter the hut, and they find Dennis in there. And they all say, "Hello, Dennis." He says, "It's great." And Barry's like, "It's great, isn't it? The old spirit's been restored."
Yeah.
Oz says, "A darts match and a piss up to follow, magic." And Moxie's like, "We better get some practice in." And Oz is like determined. He's like, "We better make a good show against the army lads." And Dennis is like, "Well," he says, "there's no panic." He says, "We can have a monumental piss up." He says, "We can forget all about the darts match." And Oz is like, "Why? What? Like, how's that like?" And the camera pans up, and Dennis says, "Magowan's pissed off with the dartboard."
With the dartboard.
And it shows the bare wall where there's all writing all around it. And then the last frame is it cuts to Moxie, and the look on Moxie's face is absolutely ruined. So there we have it, episode 9, The Alien. And yes, what an absolutely fantastic episode it was. A lot of humor in there. And like I say, there was a couple of bits that were, the camaraderie was questioned, but it just shows that they're a bunch of normal lads, and the likes of the lunatics of Magowans and stuff like that, are not welcome among their fraternity. So in this particular episode, for the first time ever, Michael Elphick got his own credit.
All right.
Normally, the only people that get their own credits are the lads, but in this particular episode, Michael Elphick got his own credit, and his own credit was the little clip of him throwing the wrench through the window.
Yeah.
The only other 3 credits were Herr Grunwald, Dagmar, and as usual, the barman.
Oh yeah.
So that was it for this episode, and what an absolutely, like I say, what an absolutely fantastic episode.
It was good.
It was a good one, yeah. And it's one of the ones that I never watched a huge amount of. There were certain episodes, like the one that's coming up, there's one that I basically know every word to, which is the one where Oz gets with the German girl.
Oh yes. The lovers.
Yeah. So I think that's episode 11 or episode 12. So it's going to be in a few weeks' time. So for some reason, that was one that I remember really vividly, and I remember watching it. So I'm just trying to think. It must have been like we had some of them on video, and maybe some of them we didn't, or whatever. But yeah. So like I say, but that one coming up, I know really, really well. But like I say, so this one, I didn't really know it that well, and it's nice to get really.
Yeah.
So, as always, guys, if you have any feedback, constructive criticism and or abuse about the episode, please feel free to email us on Auf Wiedersehen Again @gmail.com. Social medias, please do follow us. Instagram, Auf Wiedersehen Again Podcast. Twitter, @Auf Again. Please do like and share the Facebook page of Wiedersehen Again Podcast and our YouTube channel of Wiedersehen Again Podcast. Please do subscribe and click that bell. And subscribe on the audio platforms, all good podcast platforms, Spotify, iTunes, Anchor, Google, Breaker, and many, many more. New episodes are released every Friday at 10 a.m. and our music is composed and performed by the guitar man Lee Dosky. So please do like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Remember, Remember, we are sponsored by Top Gun Tattooing, number 12, the Harris Arcade in Reading. That's topguntattoo.co.uk, 01189 968 667. And for a 20% discount, you speak to Zach with the code word Hadaway and Shiteman. And remember, a free Neville and Lottie tattoo for every single listener. And remember, we are going to be launching this week our next giveaway. So our next giveaway is the Jimmy Neal autobiography in Northern Soul. So remember, to qualify for the giveaway, you have to be following us on social media, and you have to like, share, and tag your friends in the posts. So please do see all of the posts on social media. So that's it for this week, episode 9 of Auf Wiedersehen Again podcast. And we'll be back next week with episode 10. So until then, George.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen Pet.
Oh, yeah, man. All out of options, nothing